The day Audrey Hart threw my love letter into the trash. The entire cafeteria laughed. Not everyone. That is important. Some people looked down. Some people pretended to check their phones. Some people froze with their forks halfway to their mouths because they understood that humiliation was happening in front of them and did not know whether silence made them kind or cowardly. But enough people laughed. Enough for the sound to stay with me. Enough for Audrey to hear it and smile. Enough for Derek Walsh to lean back in his chair, clap slowly and say, "Come on, Miller. At least take it out of the trash. That letter probably cost you half your weekly meal budget." More laughter. I stood in the middle of Northbridge University's West Cafeteria with a brown paper envelope in my hand. Or what was left of it. The letter itself was already in the trash can beside Audrey's table, lying on top of a crushed salad container and an empty coffee cup. My handwriting was still visible on the folded page. Audrey Hart, the campus queen of Northbridge, sat at the center table near the glass wall where everyone could see her. She wore a cream sweater, a black skirt, and the kind of effortless expression people mistake for innocence until they become its target. Her blonde hair fell over one shoulder. Her lips were glossy. Her eyes were bright, not with guilt, but with satisfaction. She had not just rejected me, she had performed it. Derek Walsh sat beside her in a dark designer jacket. One arm stretched over the back of her chair like he had purchased the space around her. He was a senior in the business school, son of a trustee, president of the Venture Society, and the kind of man who believed expensive watches could substitute for a personality if the room was shallow enough. Audrey looked up at me and tilted her head. "Ethan," she said, voice soft enough to sound kind to anyone standing too far away. "I think you misunderstood my kindness." That sentence cut deeper than the laughter because for 3 years Audrey's kindness had needed me at midnight. It needed me when her statistics assignment was due and her data table made no sense. It needed me when her internship essay sounded empty and she wanted it to feel more authentic. It needed me when she had to explain my engineering project at an outreach event and did not understand half the terms in her own speaking notes. It needed me when she cried in the library basement because Derek's business circle made her feel ordinary. It needed me when she wanted someone to walk her across campus after donor dinners. But in the cafeteria with Derek watching and students recording, her kindness did not know me. I said nothing that made Audrey's smile tighten. She preferred men to beg after she hurt them. Derek picked up his coffee. "Honestly, Miller, I respect the courage," he said. "Not the self-awareness, but the courage." His friends laughed. Audrey unfolded the top page of my letter again, even though she had already thrown it away. Once she had pulled it from the envelope, read 3 lines, laughed under her breath, then held it up for Derek to see. Now she looked at it like it was evidence. "I know I don't have much to offer except honesty, patience, and everything I can build with my own hands." She glanced around the cafeteria. A few people covered their mouths. Derek laughed openly. Audrey lowered the letter. "Ethan, that's sweet. Really? But this isn't high school. Love isn't built on patience and old pickup trucks." I heard Mike Reynolds swear from somewhere behind me. Mike was my best friend. An engineering student with no volume control and a moral compass that worked best when offended. He pushed through the crowd, face red. "Audrey, don't." Audrey looked at him. "Mike, this doesn't involve you." Mike pointed at the trash can. "You made it cafeteria programming. It involves the public." Derek smiled. "Reynolds, sit down before you spill poor boy solidarity everywhere." Mike stepped forward. I lifted one hand slightly. He stopped barely. I looked at Audrey. "You could have said no." Something flickered across her face. Maybe annoyance. Maybe shame. It vanished quickly. "I am saying no. You're doing more than that." Derek leaned forward. "She is making it clear. Some guys need clear." Audrey folded the letter again. Not carefully, not respectfully. She pinched it between 2 fingers as if the paper smelled bad. Then she dropped it back into the trash can. This time deliberately, the cafeteria went quiet for half a second. Then Derek laughed. Audrey looked at me. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I just don't see a future with someone who still thinks sincerity is enough." She glanced at my jacket. Plain black, no logo, clean but old. Then at my backpack, patched twice because I hated wasting things that still worked. Then at Derek's watch. "The comparison was not accidental," she said. "You're a good person, but I need someone who belongs in the world I'm trying to enter." Derek lifted his cup slightly, like a toast. "And that world has a dress code." A few people laughed again. Mike said, "Your soul has a vacancy sign." Derek looked at him. "What?" Mike shook his head. "Too advanced for you. Continue being ornamental." Audrey stood. She walked around the table and stopped in front of me for one strange second. I thought she might apologize. Instead, she leaned close enough that only I could hear. "Don't make this worse by chasing me." I looked at her. That was the old trick. Hurt me publicly. Warn me privately not to react then. If I reacted, call it proof. I nodded once. "Thank you for being clear." Her eyes narrowed. That was not the response she expected. Derek stood too. "Good. Then you understand." I looked at him. "No, I understand her." Then I turned and walked away. Mike followed me out of the cafeteria. He was silent until we reached the engineering courtyard. That was rare. Rain clouds hung low over the campus. The old stone buildings looked darker than usual. Students crossed the brick paths with umbrellas and coffee cups. Unaware that my life had just been crushed between a salad container and a coffee cup, Mike finally said, "I'm going to say something mature." I looked at him. He took a breath. "She is a spiritually bankrupt social climber with the emotional architecture of a parking garage." I almost laughed. Almost. "That was your mature version." I removed several illegal suggestions. "Appreciated." We walked toward the engineering building. After a minute, Mike said, "You okay?" "No, good." Honest answer. I stopped under the archway. The west cafeteria was still visible behind us through the rain, through the glass wall. I could see Audrey back at the table. Derek was saying something. She laughed. My letter was still in the trash. Mike followed my gaze. "I can get it." "No." "You sure?" I watched a student toss a napkin into the same bin. "Yes." Mike's jaw tightened. "That was cruel." "Yes." "You loved her." "Yes." He looked at me carefully. Past tense. I did not answer immediately. Because love does not die the second someone humiliates you. That is one of the unfair things about being human. My pride had been cut open. My dignity had been dragged through a cafeteria. My common sense was standing somewhere far away, waving both arms. But the part of me that had helped Audrey for 3 years was still looking for a reason. Maybe she panicked. Maybe Derek pressured her. Maybe she did not know how public it would become. Maybe there was a version of this where she felt sorry later. Then I remembered her smile, not the public smile, the private one. The satisfied flicker after the first laugh. I said, "It will be." Mike nodded. "That's good enough for today." He did not know the other part. Nobody at Northbridge did. Audrey had not rejected a poor scholarship student. She had rejected Ethan Daniel Miller, son of Daniel Miller, founder of Miller Global, heir to the Miller family office. And as of 3 months earlier, the registered student representative and future voting director for the largest private investment Northbridge University had ever received. The investment was still anonymous. At my request, my father had built Miller Global from machine shop contracts into a technology empire, but he hated inherited arrogance. When I started at Northbridge, he offered me every advantage and then accepted it when I refused most of them. No donor housing, no public family announcement, no special board dinners, no private admission story, no name on buildings while I was still a student. I wanted to know what my work looked like without the family crest behind it. I also wanted to know who saw me when there was nothing obvious to gain. Audrey had answered that question with a trash can. For the next 3 months, I did not chase her. That shocked people more than the rejection. Audrey expected messages. I knew because she kept giving me openings. The first week, she posted a vague story. Sometimes kindness gets mistaken for invitation. I did not respond. The second week, she passed me outside the library and slowed down just enough for me to speak. I did not. The third week, she asked Mike whether I was still upset. Mike said he is experiencing consequences in the correct direction. She did not ask Mike again. Derek enjoyed the aftermath. He called me letter boy in the business school cafe. His friends folded napkins into envelopes when I walked past. Someone taped a fake love note to my locker in the engineering lab. Mike found it first and nearly started a war. I took it down, photographed it, and filed it. Mike stared. "Are we documenting bullying now?" "Yes." His eyes lit up. "I have a folder." "Of course you do." The strange thing was humiliation gave me time back. I no longer edited Audrey's essays. No longer fixed her presentations. No longer explained technical concepts she wanted to repeat in donor rooms. No longer waited outside buildings because she did not want to be seen arriving with me, but did not mind being walked home after midnight. My nights returned to me. So did my work. Professor Ella Harper noticed. First, she was my engineering advisor, a sharp-eyed woman who could detect weak methodology from 3 feet away and once described vague language as fog wearing a lab coat. 2 weeks after the cafeteria incident, She stopped beside my bench in Lab C and looked at the diagnostic prototype I was rebuilding. "You're moving faster. I have more time," I noticed. She watched me adjust a sensor mount, then said, "Are you all right?" I tightened the last screw. "No," she nodded. "Good. Honest students are easier to advise." I looked up. She handed me a folder, then used the pane productively. "The Foundation Review Board wants your final proposal for the Research Commercialization Lab by Friday." I stared at the folder. "The anonymous investment. Yes, it's not public yet." "No, but the work is." Professor Harper lowered her voice. "Ethan, the best answer to public humiliation is not a public tantrum. It is a record so clean that when the truth arrives, it does not need you to shout." That sentence became my rule, so I worked. The Miller investment was not a donation in the usual university sense. It was a structured investment partnership, part endowment, part venture fund, part research infrastructure expansion. It would fund student-built technologies, protect inventor ownership, provide commercialization support, and create paid research positions for low-income students who normally had to choose between lab work and rent. Dad wanted the program to exist because he had once been the kind of student who could build anything and afford nothing. I wanted it because I had seen how easily polished people took credit from quiet builders. The fund had one condition I insisted on. Every project had to verify contribution records before money arrived. No vague founder titles. No vision lead without work. No donor child replacing the person who built the system. No beautiful face pasted over someone else's dirty hands. Professor Harper liked that condition so much she wrote it into the university policy draft with terrifying precision. Meanwhile, Audrey began to struggle. At first, I tried not to notice. Then it became impossible. Without my help, her senior thesis proposal came back marked underdeveloped. Her fellowship essay missed the first internal review deadline. Her outreach presentation at the Entrepreneurship Forum was polished but hollow. During Can Day, someone asked a technical follow-up about the water access model she referenced and she looked toward me out of habit. I was sitting in the back row. I did not rescue her. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then Derek stepped in with business language that meant nothing. "Great question," he said. "We're thinking about scale holistically." Professor Harper, seated 2 rows ahead of me, wrote something in her notebook, probably not a compliment. Audrey found me after the forum near the stairwell. "Ethan," I stopped. She looked tired. Not beautifully tired, actually. Tired for a moment. I saw the girl I had thought I loved. The one who used to fall asleep over flashcards in the library basement. The one who said I made difficult things feel possible. Then she spoke. "Could you at least send me the old access framework? I'm not asking for help. I just need to check something." I looked at her. "You threw my letter into the trash." Her face flushed. "That was personal. This is professional. That's exactly why I'm asking." "No." Her mouth opened. "You're punishing me." "No, I'm not giving you my work." She stepped closer. "Ethan, don't be petty. Petty would be printing your cafeteria speech and mailing it with citations." Her eyes widened. Mike, who had appeared behind me at some point because drama summoned him like weather, whispered, "I support that project academically." Audrey ignored him. "Derek says you do this." "Derek says a lot for someone who hasn't built anything." Her face hardened. "You're jealous." "No," I said. "I'm finished." That word landed. Finished. Not angry, not begging. Finished. Audrey looked at me like I had taken something from her. Maybe I had accessed the thing she missed most. Graduation approached. Northbridge became a machine of ceremonies, deadlines, photos, and last chances. The investment announcement was scheduled for commencement morning. The university planned to reveal the Northbridge Miller Research Commercialization Fund, a long-term investment package totaling $200 million over 10 years. The first phase would include a new lab, a student venture accelerator, and a protected inventor fund, the largest private investment in Northbridge history. The biggest financial headline the school had ever had, and my name was on the founding documents not as a symbolic child of wealth. A student architect of the contribution policy and founding investment representative had argued against being announced publicly. Dad disagreed. He said, "You asked to be judged without the name. You were now let the name stand behind the work." I said, "It will look like revenge." Dad looked over the policy draft. "Only to people who think truth arriving is revenge." Mom, overhearing from the kitchen, said, "Also, if a girl throws your letter into a trash can and later discovers you funded the building she wants to enter, that is not your scheduling problem." Dad nodded. "Your mother has summarized it." Mike said something similar, but less printable. Commencement day arrived clear and warm. The main lawn was packed with families, graduates, faculty, trustees, alumni, reporters, and donors. The stage was lined with blue and gold banners. The giant screen showed rotating slides of graduates and campus landmarks. Audrey looked perfect. Of course, she did. She walked across the lawn in her black gown with a white dress underneath. Derek beside her in business school regalia. His father, Richard Walsh, sat in the trustee section with the relaxed posture of a man who expected his family name to remain one of the largest in the room. Audrey saw me near the engineering graduates. Her eyes flickered. Derek followed her gaze and smirked. He walked over before the ceremony began. "Well, letter boy," he said. "Big day. Try not to confess to anyone near a trash can." His friends laughed. I looked at him. "Derek." He blinked. That calm bothered him. Audrey shifted beside him. "Ethan, can we not do this today?" I almost laughed. "You came over here." Derek said, "Relax. We're being friendly." Mike appeared at my shoulder. "No, you're being nostalgic about bullying." "Different genre." Derek ignored him and looked at my plain graduation gown. "No honors cord." I lifted the edge of my gown slightly. "My department recognition is later." Derek smiled. "Sure." Audrey's eyes moved over me, searching for what? I did not know weakness. Maybe anger proof she still mattered. She said quietly, "I hope you have a good day." I looked at her. "You too." That disappointed her. She wanted a wound she could recognize. I gave her a wall. The ceremony began. Names were called. Speeches were made. Parents cried. Students cheered. President Marsh gave the official address about service, innovation, and responsibility. She spoke longer than usual, building towards something. Derek looked bored until she said, "This year, Northbridge University is honored to announce the largest private investment in our institution's history." The lawn shifted. Reporters lifted cameras. Trustees straightened. Audrey looked toward Derek. Derek whispered something to her with a confident smile. He thought this was about his family. Of course, he did. President Marsh continued, "The Northbridge Miller Research Commercialization Fund will invest $200 million over the next decade into student research, ethical venture formation, and protected inventor ownership." The giant screen changed. Miller Global, Miller Future Foundation, Northbridge University. Richard Walsh's smile vanished. Derek sat forward. Audrey's face went still. President Marsh said this fund was developed in partnership with Daniel Miller, founder of Miller Global, and with the guidance of a Northbridge student whose work shaped the fund's central integrity policy. Dad stood from the front donor section. The applause began immediately. He walked to the stage in a dark suit, no tie, and the old work boots Mom had failed to replace again. He took the microphone. "Thank you, President Marsh." His voice carried across the lawn. "I built my first company because a machine shop owner let me use tools after hours when I had no money and no connections. That man protected my work before anyone thought it was worth protecting. This fund exists to do the same for students here." Dad paused. "Every year universities produce builders whose names get pushed behind people with better access. We want Northbridge to become the place where that stops." Professor Harper, sitting in the faculty row, looked directly at me. Dad continued, "The student who helped design this fund understands that problem personally. He asked to attend Northbridge without public family identification. He wanted to earn his record cleanly." The lawn grew quiet. Audrey slowly turned toward me. Derek did too. Dad said, "My son, Ethan Miller." For 1 second, nobody moved. Then the engineering section erupted. Mike stood so fast his cap almost fell off. "Yes. Clean record energy." President Marsh closed her eyes briefly. The screen changed again. "Founding Student Investment Representative Ethan Daniel Miller, College of Engineering." Audrey's face went white. Derek stared at the screen like it had insulted him personally. Richard Walsh stood halfway then sat back down. I walked to the stage. Every step felt strange, not because of the attention. Because somewhere on this same campus months earlier, my letter had been lying in a trash can. While Audrey told me I did not belong in the world she wanted, now the largest investment Northbridge had ever received had my family name on it and my policy inside it. Dad handed me the microphone. I looked out over the lawn. Audrey was still staring. Derek looked furious. Mike looked like he might start a parade if given materials. I said, "Thank you, President Marsh." "Thank you, Dad." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. I continued, "When I came to Northbridge, I asked my family not to make my name public. I wanted my professors, classmates, and projects to judge me by what I did, not what my father built." I looked toward the engineering section. That was not always comfortable, but it taught me something valuable. When people don't think you have power, they show you how they treat people without it. The lawn went still. Audrey lowered her eyes. I did not name her. I did not need to. I said, this fund will support students whose work deserves protection before it becomes profitable. Every funded project will require verified contribution records, clear authorship, and safeguards against donor pressure. No student should lose credit because someone else looks more polished. No builder should have to beg to keep their own name. Professor Harper started clapping first, then the engineering faculty, then the students, then the donors who understood which direction the future money was flowing. The applause rose across the lawn. Audrey cried. Derek did not. His face hardened into something uglier. After the ceremony, the donor reception took place in the alumni hall. The same alumni hall where Audrey had once dreamed of entering beside someone understood. Now she stood near the doorway, unable to cross the room without seeing my name on every program booklet. Miller Future Foundation. Ethan Miller, founding student representative, largest private investment in Northbridge history. I stood near the stage with Dad, President Marsh, Professor Harper, and Mr. Reeves. From the foundation board members came to shake my hand. Trustees smiled too hard. Reporters asked questions about the fund. Derek watched from across the room with his father. Audrey approached alone. That was the first interesting part. Derek did not come with her. Maybe he was angry. Maybe embarrassed. Maybe he understood that standing beside her now made him look like the man she had chosen before learning the price tag. Audrey stopped a few feet away. Ethan. I turned. Her eyes were red. You're Daniel Miller's son. No, I said I'm Ethan Miller. Daniel Miller is my father. She flinched. I didn't know. I know. If I had known. I lifted one hand. Don't. Her mouth closed. I said, that sentence will not help you. Tears gathered again. She whispered, I'm sorry. I waited. She looked around the reception hall. I'm sorry for what I did in the cafeteria. Still broad, still safe. I said. Say it clearly. Her face twisted. People nearby were listening now. She knew it. She hated it. But there was nowhere to hide. I'm sorry I threw your letter into the trash. I said nothing. I'm sorry I laughed. Still nothing. I'm sorry I let Derek humiliate you. Closer. And I'm sorry I thought you were poor, so your feelings didn't matter. There it was. Ugly, accurate, useful. I nodded once. Thank you for saying it correctly. She cried harder. I was stupid. No, I said you were honest. She looked up. That's cruel. It's true. You showed me exactly what you valued. She wiped her cheek. Could we talk privately? No. The word landed harder than I expected. Her lips parted. No. You do not get private access after public humiliation. Derek appeared behind her. Then, still dramatic. Miller. Dad turned his head slightly. Derek noticed him and almost stopped. Almost. Then pride pushed him forward. He looked at me. Congratulations. You hid behind a last name and waited for a graduation reveal. Very mature. Mike appeared beside me like a bad idea with legs. You mocked a love letter and lost to university financing. Derek glared at him. Stay out of this. Mike smiled. I have a minor in staying in this. Derek looked at Dad with respect. Mr. Miller. Some of us built our reputation here openly. Dad looked at him. What did you build? Derek's mouth tightened. The Walsh Entrepreneurship Society has supported dozens of student ventures. Professor Harper, who had been quiet until then, said, including 3 currently under authorship review. Derek froze. Audrey looked at him. What? Professor Harper opened the folder in her hand. Of course, she had a folder. She always did. President Marsh's expression darkened. Professor Harper. Professor Harper said, the timing is not ideal. But since Mr. Walsh has raised student venture reputation, the matter is relevant to the new fund. Derek said this is absurd. Professor Harper looked at him. Is it? She handed 1 page to President Marsh. The Venture Society submitted 3 projects this semester for donor preview. 2 of them list business leads ahead of technical founders who dispute the order. 1 contains language from Ethan's diagnostics framework without attribution. Audrey looked at Derek. Derek said quickly, those are preliminary drafts. I laughed once. Everything becomes preliminary when records appear. Dad looked at President Marsh. The new fund will not touch Venture Society projects until contribution verification is complete. President Marsh nodded. Agreed. Derek's father stepped in. Daniel Elaine, this is not the moment. Dad looked at him. Richard, your son made it the moment. Derek's face re-eamed. This is because I laughed at his stupid letter. The room went quiet. Audrey closed her eyes. That sentence did more damage than he intended. Dad looked at me, then at Derek. What letter? I said, it doesn't matter. Mike said, it matters. I looked at him. He ignored me. Mike turned to Dad. Months ago, Ethan wrote Audrey a letter. She read it in the cafeteria, mocked it, and threw it into the trash while Derek laughed. The reception hall went silent. Audrey cried silently. Derek scoffed. It was a joke. Mom's voice came from behind us. No. I turned. Mom had arrived late because she hated donor receptions and loved me more than she hated them. She walked through the circle. In a dark blue dress, eyes fixed on Derek. A joke is when everyone has permission to laugh. Derek said nothing. Mom looked at Audrey. And you? Audrey could barely speak. I'm sorry. Mom's expression did not soften. Do not say it to me. Audrey turned back to me. I'm sorry, Ethan. I believe she was sorry, but sorry for what? For hurting me. For being exposed, for misjudging my bank account. Those are not the same apology, I said. I know. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. Her face crumpled. The investigation into the Venture Society began the next week. Derek had been pushing business students into leadership positions on technical projects they had barely touched. Not always illegally, not always clearly enough for discipline, but enough that the new fund's verification process caught it. Enough that 3 quiet engineering students came forward once they knew someone was listening. One had built a battery optimization model and been listed as technical assistant. Another had written a supply chain algorithm and been called implementation support. The third had developed a medical device prototype and was told investors preferred a cleaner founding profile. Professor Harper nearly broke a pen reading that phrase the fund delayed all 3 projects. Contribution hearings were opened. Names were corrected. Derek's Venture Society presidency ended before the summer. His father tried to argue that the process was too aggressive. Dad said protecting builders always feels aggressive to people used to taking from them. Mom said that sentence was too long. Mike said it was merchable. Professor Harper said absolutely not. Audrey was not formally punished for the letter. Cruelty is not always a violation of university policy, but consequences do not always need paperwork. The video from the cafeteria resurfaced after graduation. Someone had saved it. Someone always saves cruelty. It spread alongside the commencement clip of me being announced as the founding student investment representative. The contrast was brutal. Audrey holding my letter over the trash can. Audrey saying she needed someone who belonged in the world she was trying to enter. Then graduation day. President Marsh announcing the Northbridge Miller Fund. Dad calling me his son. Me speaking about how people treat you when they think you have no power. The internet did what the internet does. It made the story simple. Campus queen throws poor boy's love letter away. Poor boy becomes school's biggest investor. People called it fake. People called it karma. People called it satisfying. I called it exhausting. Audrey disappeared from public campus events for a while. Derek posted once. Funny how money rewrites every narrative. Mike replied, funny how video preserves yours. I told him to delete it. He said, I kept it elegant. Delete. He deleted. Screenshots survived. Near the end of summer, Audrey found me outside the new research commercialization lab. The building was still under renovation. Temporary signs covered the glass doors. Inside, students were already moving equipment into the first maker space. Audrey stood near the steps in a simple gray dress, no Derek, no audience, no glossy confidence, just Audrey. She held something in her hand, a folded piece of paper. For one wild second, I thought it was my letter. It was not. It was a new one. Ethan, she said. I stopped. She swallowed. I wrote something. I looked at the paper, then at her. I'm not taking it. Her face fell. I thought maybe you'd want. No. She nodded quickly, crying. Okay, that's fair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I kept thinking about what you wrote in your letter. I looked at her sharply. You threw it away. I know. Then how? Her voice broke. Mike took a picture before you left the cafeteria. Of course, he had. Mike later admitted he did it because he thought I might want proof that I had been sincere. Not foolish. Audrey said he didn't send it to me. Amber did after the video went around. I read it. I said nothing. She cried harder. You wrote that you didn't have much to offer except honesty, patience, and everything you could build with your own hands. She looked toward the construction crew inside the lab. You built all this? No, I said a lot of people did. But you were part of it. Yes. She wiped her face. I was wrong. That's broad. She nodded, accepting the correction. I was wrong to think money was the only thing that made someone belong. I was wrong to think your quiet meant you had nothing. I was wrong to take your help and then mock the way you offered love. Still closer. I was wrong to throw your letter into the trash. I let the sentence sit. Then I said, yes. She folded her own letter tighter. Can I ever fix it? No. Her breath caught. I continued. You can become better. That is not the same as fixing what you did to me. She looked down. That's fair. She turned to leave, then stopped. If I had said yes back then, would you have told me? I knew what she meant about Dad, about Miller Global, about the investment, about the world she thought I could not enter. Eventually, I said. Her eyes filled with fresh regret. I really threw everything away. I shook my head. You threw away a letter. Everything else was never yours. That was the last thing I said to her. By fall, the Northbridge Miller Fund opened its first application cycle. The line from my commencement speech was printed inside the policy handbook. When people do not think you have power, they show you how they treat people without it. Professor Harper hated that it sounded quotable. Mike loved it. Dad said it was useful. Mom said it was sad but necessary. The first cohort included 27 student projects. Some were brilliant. Some were messy. Some failed before winter. But every founder record was clear. Every contributor signed their own authorship statement. Every technical builder sat in the room when money was discussed. That was what mattered. One evening, I walked past the West Cafeteria. The trash can near Audrey's old table had been replaced. A newer model, black metal, cleaner, completely ordinary. I stopped for a second. Mike was with me. He followed my gaze and said, "Want me to kick it?" No, symbolically, no. Lightly, Mike. He sighed. You never let me support you through property damage. I looked through the glass wall. Students were laughing over dinner. Someone was writing notes. Someone was waiting nervously with flowers near the drink station. Life continued in places that once felt like endings. I said, I'm good. Mike looked at me. Really? I thought about the letter, the trash can. Audrey's smile, Derek's laugh, Dad on the graduation stage, the fund, the lab, the students who would keep their names because mine had been mocked. Yes, I said. Really? The letter Audrey threw away did not come back. It did not need to. Some things are not meant to be recovered from the trash. Some things are meant to show you who put them there. Audrey thought I was poor, so she treated my feelings like garbage. On graduation day, she learned I was the school's biggest investor. But the investment was never the real answer. The money did not make my letter valuable. Her rejection did not make it worthless. The real answer was what I built. After I stopped trying to prove my heart to someone who measured love by status, she threw away a page. I built a future. And by the time she realized the difference, the trash had already been emptied.